Well, welcome to the third Trust Chats Live. Very excited to have this conversation today. It also is one of the ones that most people are highest numbers of people who registered for it. So there is something about this topic that is drawing people in, and I'm very excited about that. So just what we'll cover today, I'm going to do a brief info for those who might not know me. I'm going to tell you a little bit of why behind the Trust Chats. This is a bit of a repeat if you've been at the other two. And then I have a presentation, and then we'll do Q&A. The presentation is extra brief today because I really wanted to give a lot of space for the chats side of the equation. And also, I know so many of you have a lot of your own insights on this. And so I want to make sure that the learning is across all of you participating today. So hi, everyone. I'm Dallas. I'm the founder and principal of Trust. And one of the reasons why I'm doing these Trust Chats live is because in all of the work that I do, working with different clients, nonprofit organizations, universities, and the like, is around taking climate action, climate justice work. It's usually in very complex organizations like all of yours. And at the end of the day, what I've identified is that, there are technical solutions out there for climate work, and there are innovative financing options out there for this type of work as well. One of the things where I find we're falling short is how do we actually have effective communication with all of the very brilliant people that are working on this challenge. And so I started the Growing Trust series, which gives tools and resources to organizations and individuals who really want to up their game in figuring out that collaborative piece, right? How do we get different people talking to each other? How do we not get stuck in gridlock when there is conflict? And then how do we create structure and process to allow ourselves to come up with a solution? So I do a lot of facilitation in this space, but I also do a lot of training to help provide teams and individuals increase their skill set in this space. So here we are with the Trust Chats Live with kind of like little bits, bite-sized talking points around organizational change management. I would love to ask you a couple questions today. So if you got your phone out, you can do it this way, but I'm also going to escape from this. Oops. Where am I? And just share this screen too, to allow you all to get in here. So I see 5 people are in. I'm going to give you a little bit of more time to jump in. I'll also copy this and put it in the chat if you would like to do it from your computer instead. There we go. Okay. So we have 10 people in. Let's see who else we can get in here. All right, I'll get started. My check-in question for everyone is, what is a trait of a good leader? So love having this as a check-in question. It's going to be like a one-ish word response with our little word cloud here. So patience and endurance, honest, listener, inspiring, integrity. Nice. Love it. Thank you. Yeah, no one said having a corner office, so that's good. So there's a lot of key insights here around integrity, honesty, supportive, trustful, an active listener, inspiring and providing tools, accommodating. Okay, thank you for that. I have a couple more questions just so we can get to know each other a little bit better. What brings you to this Trust Chat today, this topic in particular? Nice. Give you a couple more minutes here. All right. And then the last one that I have is, what is your position in your organization currently? So if you were to complete this sentence, I am trying to lead change from. I think I have this setting where you can choose more than one. Maybe you're awesome. Thank you. This helps me get to know all of you a little bit better and get a little bit of insight of where you are trying to lead change from. So I will go back to my presentation here. Slideshow. And I just want to start off with this slide. Oof, things are hard. And I think about change and wanting to create change in a couple of levels right now. Yes, within your organization, but there's this macro level, wanting to be being the change you want to see in the world. And there's this whole other level of leading from where you are on the macro level as well. So I just want to sit on that because I think it's important to realize, and especially if you're coming in from higher ed, I really want to recognize that you have an extra layer of probably difficulty leading change during this time because it's just not the usual day-to-day that we've been in previously. I also wanted to say that this was a tough one for me to prepare a brief presentation for because I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much to say on this topic. And I had this long list and I had way too many slides and it got real crazy. And so I decided not to go that route because that wouldn't have been super beneficial for everybody and we wouldn't have a lot of the chat part of it. But I did, through this whole process, realize there were three key concepts that I really wanted to have just as foundation. And then we'll go into the questions that you have and also bring in your expertise to these trust chats as well. So one of the first things that I find, especially when I'm starting a new project with a client, a lot of my consulting work is strategic planning around sustainability and decarbonization and climate justice. So big organizational change shift, right? And really the desire of the change is not to have the sustainability officer insert one or two people here be the person responsible for everything. So one of the key things that I ask is to make sure that they are really clear of what their why is before they start their change process and making sure that it's connected to the broader value set of the organization as well. So I will just, keep it like I have this set of questions in my one of my templates that I pull into every one of my first meetings. And also often whenever I'm prepping for a big board meeting or something like that, I make sure that people are really grounded in being able to clearly explain to me, be able to write it on paper and explain to the person next to them, why is this important? And it seems like, well, of course that's important, Dallas. But the reality is I think 100% of the time, I will lay this out and I realize that if I'm talking to two or three people who are in a group that are preparing for this, they all have slightly different answers. and that, I know what it is, but I am having a hard time articulating it. And I'm actually not 100% sure what success will look like. And I'm not 100% sure how it's like. So we kind of have this gut instinct that we need to change and we want to, and we're feeling compelled to do this change work. But sometimes we go from that into trying to like get the organizational change that we haven't even grounded ourselves enough to be able to clearly articulate what we are trying to do. So before anything, sometimes this is like the first couple of meetings is multiple drafts of this where we can all look at it and be like, yes, this is what we're trying to do. The reason why this is important is because if you are able to spend time on this piece of really understanding your why, it is something that you can return to often. I like to call it the North Star of your work, right? Because my guess is if you have a high level why, and I mean high level, like what are we trying to do in regards to high level change? Like what's your high level goal? You are going to be able to still move in the direction of your North Star, even if the tactic that you were trying isn't working. Right? And I think sometimes when we're trying to do organizational change or trying to change from where we are, we start with a tactic. We start with, I want to do this program, or I want to start this initiative. And they say no. And you're like, see, can't get anything done here. But if you really leveled up and you asked why you want to do that, my guess is there's 2 or 3 or 4 different ways in which you can still head towards your North Star, even if your initial tactic didn't get the approval. So I really think it's so important to ground yourself in why I want to do this work at the highest goal level. Okay, next up. We got to rethink what you think about meetings. And anyone who knows me knows that I take meeting preparation and meeting facilitation quite seriously. And what I mean by needing to rethink it is I think we've gotten into this headspace that we just kind of suffer through meetings so then we can like get to the other work, right? Like usually maybe the meeting is helpful for maybe one person because they want to make sure you're doing your thing, but you're like, oh my gosh, this isn't organized and I could be doing something else right now and this isn't of high value for me. So there's just like lots of examples of cartoons that sort of play out how bad meetings can be, from people checking their phones to doing their emails in the meeting, not actually being present, and also just showing up and trying to wing it while the meeting started. Like, what are we doing today? Like, how should we organize this, right? But I really do think that if we think about where we are in the organization, especially if you are not the leader within your organization or even in your group, to me, this is where change leadership takes place. One, because you are in meetings. You're in one right now. Technically, this is more of like a presentation style, but my guess is you've had a couple of Zoom meetings this week, and you've probably had some informal meetings, and you probably had some in-person meetings and a one-on-one, and all of those times are the time to practice your change management and leadership skill set. The reality is, though, is because we have been sort of conditioned to kind of suffer through meetings and to not prepare for them and not to think about them as the place where change happens, we're not prepared for that, which is why we need to grow our capacity to know what we want out of our meetings, how it connects to our big North Star why, and how do we actually engage people in our meetings so at the end of the day they are also working towards that big picture change and not just seeing everything as like, oh, there's Angela's like pet project, right? Because you bring it up at every meeting, but you've never actually engaged people in the discussion and figured out how can we move this initiative forward together. So the last thing I want to say is that there is just a lot of emotional labor in trying to lead change. And it is important to find your ground. And I saw in the little word cloud there that someone mentioned being grounded. And for me, finding my ground looks like this. And again, this is like the how not to be jaded piece of it. I have learned to just like embrace the fact that change management is hard. It's hard work, and I know that there's an emotional labor to it. And when I do get stuck, I try to shift gears away from like this isn't working to why isn't this working? And my background was in organizational change management. That's what I did my grad work in. And so I'm just like, it's a little mind trick, right? But I'm like, okay, what if I was still getting like my graduate degree in this work and this was a classroom assignment and I'm supposed to be understanding, this organization wants to have, improve X, Y, and Z, but there's a lot of pushback. Your job is to get curious as to why there's leadership pushback, what people's perceptions are, and just, look at it from a different angle than something that is like just totally near and dear to your heart and feels like a personal threat if people say no to it. Just giving yourself a little bit of space between what you're trying to do and yourself, because you're seeing it through sort of this investigative curiosity lens. I have found when I've done that, the people who sort of frustrate me when I'm trying to create change, I have been able to approach them with curiosity, and they can tell in my tone of voice that I'm actually sincerely trying to understand what am I missing here. And we've been able to work through some of the stickier things. That being said, not everything that you want to happen in your organization is necessarily going to happen. And so my other tip and trick for not getting jaded is to remind yourself that you are practicing showing up the way you want to show up in the world, right? So even if I don't create change in this organization, I'm strengthening those change agent muscles for other parts of my life. Maybe it's with my family. Maybe it's in a future career. Maybe it's in an organization I volunteer for. And the reality is that people are going to be at different levels of willingness to change, or the timing is right or not right. And so every time I do something that's hard, and even if I don't get the green light to go ahead, I know that I have practiced that skill set of a difficult conversation. And I know that I have practiced speaking up for a value of mine, even when I felt like I was swimming upstream to do it against the current. And I think everyone could benefit from practicing that. And I think, especially with the context of what we're seeing right now, practicing being able to voice our values, even when it feels like we're swimming upstream doing it, is worthwhile. And then the last one is, throughout this time, how can I practice staying grounded even when I feel deeply passionate? So the first two kind of are one tactic for that. But I also just, as I'm getting curious with other people, I've learned to get curious with my behaviors and my reactions to when I get no's or different behaviors that feel dismissive to my change management work. And for this one, it's also for me personally been going to therapy and trying to understand, whoa, that was tricky. Like I had a very big reaction to that. Let's dig in, right? So growing my window of resilience, growing my ability to weather the storms and to grow my endurance to keep moving a project forward, even if it's hard, is this other piece that, again, even though I get frustrated, even though I'm like, oh, I just want this to be, all of that has allowed me to feel less jaded in the workplace and realize this is a life skill set that I can carry with me along the way, and it's worth the time and effort. So that's the end of my presentation. And I would love to be able to now shift gears and just answer some of these questions. So, I mean, I'm excited to start anywhere with these questions. And if anyone wants to chime in on one that they can read here, like, yeah, let's do this one. But the hope is that, people can unmute themselves and it really becomes more of a chat on this topic. Does anyone have a preference of one of these questions? Or maybe it was yours.
It's not my question, but the bottom right, I think, is really speaking to me at this moment.
Thanks, Sophia. So the bottom right, you said, at what point do you know something you would like to impact is out of your control? Oof. Um, that is a good one. And I mean, I'll start, but I would love to pass it on to someone else who has maybe experienced this themselves. I think one of the things that I've learned is that, except for my behavior, everything's out of my control in some way. Does that make sense? So I know what you're saying in regards to organizational change management. Like, I really want to move this initiative forward, but it's like not in my control. Um, but I think in regards to the skill set of moving it forward, there are elements that you could be able to um what am I trying to say here? Let me like that's I got to do a take two. What I'm trying to say is that when it feels out of control, my gut instinct is to go to another person within your organization and ask what their point is for this decision. Where does it start and where does it end off, and what role could you play in that process? So it's more of the like, this is out of my control, but more of curious, whose control is it in side of it. Does anyone want to jump in on this one? It's a tricky one. That's a good one to start off with.
I totally agree with what you're saying, Dallas. I would argue that if you're working at a higher education institution and everyone is working towards the same mission, vision, goals, strategic pillars, the understanding is that everyone has a role. So if it feels like you don't have a place in the decision making around something, there should be an opportunity for you to. And it might seem like it's outside of your job or your sphere of influence, but showing initiative and getting curious, like you were saying, I think people are, that's like magnetizing for people and they get excited about it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to get involved, reframing your mindset from that's not in my circle of what I do here or what I'm responsible for, and more of I'm responsible for everything because I work at this organization that's driving towards these things. And so in order to help this organization drive towards these things, I am part of it. But again, who are the people that are closer to maybe the decision-making framework around it?
Yeah, Jillian, thank you. I think you did a much better job getting those words
Team effort, team
from
effort.
brain to mouth outwards. Um, the other thing that I was thinking of, Sophia, on this question is, and I should have paused a little longer on my bias of why meetings are the place where you can really show your leadership, because I facilitated my way into a leadership position at my last organization. Um, I like wasn't actually I was invited to like senior leader meetings and then board meetings because I kind of got put into that. I was the only female, and they're like, you know how to take notes, right? Vibe. Has anyone ever been in that one? But I was like, I also am willing to facilitate for you. So she slices, she dices. I can take notes and I can facilitate. And what happened was, things that seemed at the time out of my control, because these are board level decisions that were happening. Because I leaned in with my sphere of influence, I'm a very good note taker, and I'm really good at facilitating. Oh, and I'm really good at preparing for meetings. So maybe I should be sitting down with the president before our board meetings. Oh, and through that skill set that I built over time, I actually did have more and more control of it, because I saw it through kind of what Jillian was saying. I have a stake in this organization, and I'm going to try to figure out what tiny slice of it I can bring to that change. Uh, and at the time, it seemed really small, but it actually grew into something quite big. And by the time I left, I was on the executive team, and not just invited to the meetings to facilitate, but was invited to the meetings as a participant. Okay. Yeah, Angela.
It's kind of a related to this. And I think it's because when I hear everything you've said makes sense around, if you don't have the ability to, it's out of control, the impact is out of your control. And there are a lot of ways where you can still influence in that realm. I've been encountering situations where in trying to do that, the wider organization sort of dismisses what the other people in the organization dismiss my input as kind of being naive or like, hey, you don't know. Like, so I'm just like, hey, this is another way we can approach this. And there seems to be like coming across a sort of jaded thing. People that agree with me, it's not people that are opposing the things that we're working on. They would also love to be working on them, but they're basically like, oh yeah, that's been tried. Good luck with that because that's not how this organization works. Or yeah, oh, in my center, we tried that too and it totally failed. So why bother? So there's just kind of where that influence encounters people that are supportive, but so jaded that it starts to erode and starts to kind of bleed into either me or other people on my team.
Oh my gosh, yes. And I'm just like scanning the group here. How many people have been in that position? Like, totally. And I feel that a lot, Angela. And I think I can talk about it from a couple perspectives. I can talk about this from my perspective at my old organization where I was like, wondered if my microphone was on because I would say something and it was like, no acknowledgement. Or I was told like, well, you just don't get business. That's not how things are working. And I was like, wait, what? It was just dismissed. And I think what was tricky about that is, all these things that we just talked about, the importance of curiosity, of where the person's coming from, and those things that were not there on the other person's side. So I had to really do extra lifting on, these follow-up questions and my curiosity towards their hard nose, right? Like, what experience do you have that, and this is where if you like rewind to like 25 to 30-year-old Dallas, like there would be a no and my face would go immediately bright red because I'm like just trying to hold together and I'm like super passionate about it. And like I would either burst out in one direction or I would just like kind of sink back into my chair and be like, I'm never engaging with you again, and like close the door. But because of that muscle being flexed over and over and over and over again of like, nope, it's never gonna happen, it's not gonna work. And being a consultant, working with lots of different organizations where that person has been in every single meeting I feel like I've ever facilitated now, I'm like, oh, you have insight that I need to know so this could be a successful program. Because I definitely don't want to do the program that you're talking about that didn't work and will never work. Because obviously it doesn't work and it'll never work. But I'm really interested about what didn't work as a learning lesson to figure out going forward. And maybe my approach is a hard no, and you're saving me lots of time. Or maybe technology is different now, or maybe that person that was really hard to work with kind of doesn't work for anymore. So there has been a change in our landscape. And I want to sit down with you thinking about what didn't work and what did work and learn from this. And I had this example of one person in particular. This was for a composting program at a university. And this one person just really was aggressive about like why this never work, about staff training and all of these things. And I was able to stay grounded. And I said, well, let's make sure we understand why. And it turns out the training was being timed at the same time where there's a lot of staff who take vacations. It was actually like not a huge challenge, but like by me not like going and like shutting my door because of the aggressive nature or like we can't do this or whatever and leaning into that, we actually found a workaround quite easily. But again, this is that like I really had to work on my own skill set to make that work. And I find when I'm doing this on behalf of a client, I'm able to stay way more grounded because I don't have the long-term relationships with this. When I was doing it in my old organization, I found it much harder to stay grounded because I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to sit next to this person in the next meeting, right? Like there's sort of like a relational challenge there. So it can be more tricky within your own organization, but I really do think when this like question up here, like what do you do with these people who are roadblocks? When I'm doing strategic planning processes and we're talking about who should be invited to the different working groups and stuff, everyone's like, oof, not this person. They're like a squeaky wheel and they're going to throw up all the roadblocks. So I was like, we want to know the roadblocks now. We want to know it in the planning process. We want to know why it's not going to work. We got to have that voice early on, not only because we don't want to create a plan with like known roadblocks or challenges, but two, this is an opportunity to bring this person along in a different culture that you're going to create through your planning process. Because you're going to actually listen to them all the way through, because they're going to get insights from different people and perspectives, because you are seeing meetings as a valuable place to collaborate versus, kind of a report out, kind of swapping back and forth.
Yeah. So basically
Yeah.
I'm sensing the theme of like seeing the kind of naysay or the dismissal of something as an opportunity to start a different conversation rather than taking that was where it's usually intended, which is to be like, oh, forget it. Like you're barking up the wrong tree. Instead, like reframing that into oh, okay, tell me more about that. And what do you think we might be able to do differently? Like as a start.
Totally, Angela. And I personally have had to get honest with myself that I'm like, this person's so close-minded. And then I like have this little outside of me moment looking back, I'm like, oh, I'm being very close-minded too. Like I'm annoyed that like 5 people like this and they don't, and they're gonna be my roadblock versus being like, okay, these 5 people agree with me, but this person might have insight into my blind spot that the other 5 people didn't see. So who else would like to go? Or would like to jump on what Angela was just talking about?
If it's okay, I'm kind of interested in the middle right. But
Yeah.
a little bit different of a reframing. Like, so the question you have here is what's something you should avoid doing when trying to create change from a non-leadership position? I feel like in my position, I'm coaching people that are in a lower, for lack of a better term, position in the hierarchy. I'm like coaching them on leadership, but they're not always open to it. They're kind of stuck in the way. And they're just like, no, but this, maybe that builds on Angela's. Like, how do you get people to shift their mind? Not the people that are like, no, we can't do this, but more the people that are like, no, I don't need that skill set to be a leader. I'm already good where I'm at.
I appreciate that, Jillian. Mostly because I find the training, like the Growing Trust Series training, and it's like the first step of organizational change growth is to identify that you need growth and leadership. And I feel like a lot of the, I think a lot, this is a little bit of higher ed's fault, ironically, since a lot of you guys work with higher ed. We are like told that to be successful, you're like really good at spreadsheets or like awesome at writing or like super smart in engineering, or you insert all the things. And we also have like other leadership examples of, well, the leader of my organization is like super, super good at spreadsheets and also good at this, so we get this in our head. That no, I've got it. Like I have this skill set. And I think the harder piece is giving feedback to the soft skills within leadership. And a big part of that soft skill set is to have ability for self-reflection and understanding how, like I said, in my gossip presentation, it's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. Right. Like, I feel like so often we're like, and there's that saying, like, if everyone's an asshole, then maybe you're the asshole in that moment, right? Maybe like you're the one who's not getting it. And it's kind of tricky because I feel like in that coaching moment, how do we kind of bring a mirror up to them and say, like, this is what I'm seeing? And Jillian, I'm wondering on your end, this is on that feedback side, how soft of a uh, pitch are you throwing to them when you're seeing their leadership gaps? Are you being like super clear about it, or is it like, well, maybe if you were to, and they're like, no, I'm good? Or are you like able to say, I'm seeing these things that I think it's getting in your way?
Yeah, I would say it's less of a pitch and more of a roll on the ground, like you're gonna get it right. You got it, you know. So
And it
I
rolls
mean, it
right
could
past their
be,
feet, and you're like, nope, didn't
yeah.
get it.
I mean, I think that that's helpful to think about it like that, like because I've heard you say before, clear is kind, and you know, being direct. Sometimes I feel like when I'm saying things, people are just like, are just like, yeah, Jillian's gonna tell us she's gonna try and coach us again. Nope,
Yeah.
just gonna move
Yeah.
forward in the project. You know, I don't know.
No, I can hear that for sure. One final thought on that is, I mean, it is harder to do it with a client. I think you, as Jillian, I know how you work with people, and I know you're skilled at this. But I think I always let them know that like it's their choice. I am there to support them. And also, I have seen this not work lots of times, and here's why. And right now, I think the path that you're taking is the not going to work path. And it's my job to help identify that. And I give my rationale why. Like I was working with a client who was like, "Oh, I'll get like the communication out, in time." And I was like, "We need to do it a week in advance." They're like, "Well, that's kind of like a lot of time to do it." And I was like, "Look, we are building trust right now, and we need to show to people that we respect their time and that they might have other projects that they're doing and they might have all these other things underway. And for you to send something to them that it requires reading and review and forethought, like a day in advance, is signaling to them that you don't respect their time." And so I've set my pitch. I think it's going to impact how people see you and your leadership in this project and the trust building. And I also know you have lots of other things going on right now. So how do you balance like the projects you need to get out the door that are time sensitive right now, and this email and resources that need to get out the door for everyone else you're working with? And maybe there's somewhere in the middle, but this is my advice. And what was, so I was able to say it in a way that just clearly kind of painted the picture of what I see in regards to organization. You're painting the path for organizational change right now, and this is an important step. And I don't want you to, it's like watching someone about to step in dog poop and being like, I wouldn't do that if I were you, right? Like, I'm not going to forcefully like push you out of the way, but I've been on this path enough to know that if you step right there, you're gonna not like it. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. Okay, let's see. I think I saw another kind of directional, this one up here. Oops. Top left. Let me see. Go back to my chats. Top left. Okay, so yeah, Christy, I'll go to the top left one. Do you want to like add any more context to that question for you?
Sorry, I was on mute. I just find that an ongoing issue is that there's a very us versus them mentality, especially in higher ed, especially when you're working in facilities and everybody else is not.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be really nice if we could find ways to bridge that gap. And so that it's kind of why I'm looking at that particular question.
Yeah, no, I can feel that for sure. Um, so you're working, like if you're working with another team across campus or another department, and you're trying to help fix these operational issues and you're not actually a member of that. I think there's a couple things that come to mind here. One thing that you just said really resonated with me, and this was actually when I was doing student leadership training. We talked a lot about, them, like how quickly these student interns would be like, they don't get it, or they are doing this. I was like, whoa, careful. The second you point fingers and call them a they, or, those people, you become that on the other side, right? Like our language matters. And sometimes just even our vocabulary, even though we're frustrated that they're not playing along with us, we are using language that is furthering this chasm between the two groups, and making it in-group, out-group, depending on which group you're in, they might both feel that way. And so I think one of the practices, and Christy, I'm interested in how this would resonate with you, and this is where every meeting matters, right? Going back to this slide of like, in every one of your meetings that you have, like that is your opportunity to practice a change skill set. And in being that voice in the meeting, be like, can we practice something? Can we practice talking about these departments with as an us, like, or we framework, so we are seeing ourselves under the broader umbrella of our institution or organization? Because I think what's getting in our way is we're having in groups, out groups, and I think it's continuing to make this more challenging. And like, what if we approach it that way going forward? And I think that's could be a helpful way to, like, a small change in our vocabulary as a way to try to reduce the gap and remind yourselves, similar to what Jillian said earlier, that you guys are all actually working for the same organization with the same mission vision. And all of you can, in different departments, are put under different types of stress that maybe the other person doesn't see. And so, if you, and going back to the meeting facilitation, if there is this, like, if the tension is happening in meetings because one department's coming to meet with facilities, and there's like these operational challenges, and they're like, it feels like people are pointing fingers at facilities, and you're like, what? We are doing so much already. Like, what would happen if you had, like, think to yourself, I don't want to do that meeting again. I know this is like, as a facilitator or like a consultant, I'd be like, oh, don't go down that route. There's a dog poop, right? You're going to step right in it, right? So in your view, Christy, you can be like, I don't want to have that meeting again. You know exactly how it's going to play out. What if we did it differently? What if we prepared for a meeting that gave everyone an opportunity to kind of voice how their role is challenged in this current space? And what if we, like, with a goal of kind of empathy building, we started with understanding the challenges, and collectively, with sort of the we mentality, built a solution together, and use that like a sturdy leadership framework and guidance to move that forward, which is one of the reasons why I lean so heavily on how many times I've been unstuck or supported a client being unstuck by actually thinking through the touch points I have with these people, which are often meetings, and how we can do it differently so it's intentionally collaborative versus limited airspace and people talk over each other. Thank you for that question, and I'm hoping that was helpful.
It's helpful. It is. I think you touched on something important, which is finding empathy. And it's hard because, at least in my situation, these meetings aren't actually happening. So those opportunities aren't happening. These conversations aren't happening. So what I need to do is figure out how to make them happen.
Oh, yeah, this kind of goes back to like, what is, what, I have a very sensitive mouse. At what, this is that, what is my area of control, right? So, maybe your area of control isn't to like kind of do a Jedi mind trick and be like, you will get along. But maybe you do have a area of control being like, hey, I have an idea. can we host a meeting where we actually talk through these things and kind of work through activity or agenda that would give people some grounding and some empathy building, and so we can build off of that. And kind of that could be, it seems small, right? But that could be your area of influence.
Dallas, I have a question that's kind of in this sphere, but it's related a little bit more to the jaded piece. Like, do you have advice for, and let me, for some context, I am often the only person of color or woman of color in a room, and sometimes the piece that I feel jaded about isn't necessarily the project or how we're running meetings, but how the organization is operating at a systemic level. And how equity is being treated as like outside entity rather than something that starts right in your meetings or starts right here at home. And being the only person of color is extremely daunting, and it can become something that ends up being completely on your shoulders and then leads to a lot of like feelings of jadedness. Do you have advice for like continuing to find that resilience to talk to people, or you know, kind of hold the fire as much as you can as someone who is trying to keep that momentum moving forward in institutions? I know this is like I guess like from your perspective as a manager and someone who's been in the experience of being sometimes the only woman in a room.
Yeah, Azanta, thank you so much for sharing your question, your thoughts. This one is so tricky because it's like the invisible, it's like more invisible for people. And there is also this like the implicit biases that people have, that like it's not like they're doing it and know they're doing it. It's they can't even see it, or they think they're being awesome at it, which is even harder. You know, I think you and I've talked about this, of one of the most valuable things that I've learned as just as like often the only woman in a room is just to have another woman and to be like, oh my gosh, right? Like it's happening, right? This sort of this like desire to not feel like I'm crazy, or gaslit, or you know, some of the bigger challenges I had in my old organization is I was the only woman, and I did get this like, what you're saying isn't true type of thing. And I was like, I'm pretty sure what I'm saying is true. This doesn't, but I didn't have anyone else there to like give me any sort of affirmation. And it was really hard. And so obviously that identifying a community in which you can talk to, but I also think, Azanta, a lot about having, you know, making that request to someone who you don't feel supported by is a huge leap, and that is a lot of emotional labor for you and like not fair. I'm thinking about the person, if there is a person that you do feel like there is, feel like an ally in this work, but is like white, that they can be step up and request changes and suggest that the organization shift in a direction, and it's not coming from the only person of color in the room that is like, I can't believe I'm the one who has to say this right now.
Right.
I don't know how that lands for you, but like that's what I feel like I see a lot, is just like a complete mismatch, and people not being able to see it at all. And I think a lot of white people feel like it's not their place to talk about race. And then it's like, well, then who's going to talk about it? And I think what that to me shows that people, again, getting curious and starting with themselves, is how can they develop their skill set and understanding of systemic racism so they can show up better in the workplace and in meetings, and design more equitable meetings too.
Yeah. I mean, you and I have talked about it a lot, and I think some of it is also like choosing to show up when you want. Sorry, excuse me, choosing to show up when you can and relying on the people that you think you are allies in the work. I think some things that I struggle with is that like a lot of guilt of or like it's a lot of guilt and then also like someone trying to assuage me in the moment where it's like, oh yeah, no worries, like I know, like I hear you and I'm so sorry, and then going back to, you know, that the same behaviors or
Right.
microaggressions over and over. um I mean it's it's a systemic problem, and obviously like we can't solve it with one conversation or one one meeting or anything like that. It's definitely, it takes a lot of work on everyone's part. But I find myself feeling very jaded about that certain thing.
No, and I appreciate that, Azanta. And I honestly, this goes to one of the reasons why I really, really like one of the trainings I do, which is the Trust Together one, which is about basically developing trust and vulnerability and feedback on your team, because one of the main components of it is to understand when you feel like your bottom is like pulled from underneath you, and to identify these challenging moments, and be able to share that in a more honest way. And I think what happens is, I think when someone, I'm picturing someone being like, "Oh, Azata, yes, okay," but they're like keeping an arm's length distance from your experience, which for me personally feels icky. When someone's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry that's happening to you way over there," versus being like, "Ah, yes, like your experience is your experience, but I have a part in me that has felt invisible or has felt tokened or has felt a certain way, and I'm able to look to change so much more because I can empathize with your experience, even though where my empathy is coming from is not the same experience." Kind of, Christy, going back to your comment of maybe we just need more space for empathy,
Right,
in
right.
the workspace, in the workplace, right? Which where is there's a sweatshirt that said empathy on it. I loved it. Okay. We maybe have time. Oh, we're actually running out of time, but does anyone have any final questions or thoughts? Well, I have a couple things for you. I would like to let you know that I have so much more to say on this topic and would love an opportunity to share it with you. And, you know, there's the Trust You course, which is specifically around meeting facilitation. It's meeting facilitation for organizational change. It's, instead of being like, I guess I'm having a meeting where we're talking about kind of being more connected and how this can improve our work experience, you're like, oh, I have the tools to do this meeting. I feel comfortable and confident, and I know I can think about the right pathway to get there. And then the Trust Together one really is about kind of having shared vocabulary and tools to allow ourselves to have some self-reflection of how we show up in the workplace and how other people show up or have to show up in the workplace to be seen. And then, how we can develop our skill set of giving feedback that clear is kind, and what this would look like if a team was able to kind of come from this place of empathy and vulnerability and having shared vocabulary, what we'd be able to accomplish together if we felt safe in the work that we did. So I would love to see you there. And I'll be following up from this session today, not only with the video from today, but I also have a slide deck that I use often when someone's about to start a strategic planning process, or I'm like, ooh, fill this out. I'm looking at Elaine, because Elaine knows this, where I'm like, before you reach out to anybody, you got to make sure you know this. These set of slides are going to be really helpful for you to have in your back pocket. And it ends up being something that you end up using their entire planning process. And it could be a big strategic planning process, or it could just be your change management process that can help with that. And I think the last thing I wanted to do is drop a link to a document asking for feedback on how today went. And there's also a space to ask what other topics you would like on a Trust Chat Live. This is the last one of the fall, but hoping to pick it up again, maybe in January, February. So if there's a topic in particular that would be great to hear about, or that maybe more in depth on something that we talked about today, let me know. I'm just gonna make sure, say everyone, oops, sorry. I'm gonna make it so you can actually edit it. Okay, so I'll drop that link again. If you click the link now, you should be able to get in. And with that, I'll be hanging out for another 5-10 minutes if you have any other questions. But it was great seeing so many of you today.
Bye. Thank you so much for this.
Yeah, thank you.